This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Welcome back to the show.
What you just said.
9 to noon.
Just listen. Now, what did I do wrong?
I mean, pick your poison with...
Yeah, but...
Ooh! Thank you.
Copyright Dan Barrero.
Hey, have a seat for a second.
9 to noon, hails the Hal. Welcome, and a happy Wednesday to you. Chris Finch is coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves and is nice enough to join 9 to noon weekly, courtesy of Second Harvest Heartland and twoharvest.org, also prize picks. Second Harvest Heartland, for every dollar donated, they provide 3 meals to those in need. Wonderful organization, and Coach Finch is on the board. Twoharvest.org to help if you are so inclined. Chris, Paul Allen, good morning.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well. You're probably doing okay despite the recent Indiana game. You get a little downtime now, some practice time because things have been a bit topsy-turvy of late. And why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, our defense has fallen off. Honestly, people like to talk about how maybe our offense is sputtered here and there, but for me, it's the defense. I think we have to spend the next 2 days, and we're fortunate to have 2 days of practice here at this point in the season, 2 days in a row. We're going to rebuild our defense, and it's going to start with our ball contain, which we've been inconsistent. You probably heard me complaining about it all season. Last year we were elite. We got to get back there. Then just I think from that, we've got to get a little bit better at, some game plan execution points, which, it's just attention to detail stuff.
This as you probably have heard, is known as the State of Hockey, and there are a lot of tried and true hockey fans who enjoy the Chris Finch interviews weekly 9 to noon. So for those who don't exactly know what high-end ball contain is, how would you explain it?
Yeah, it's simple. It's one-on-one defense. It's you and the ball. I think that's where it starts. It's like anything else. Who's going to win that battle? And if you can influence that ball and keep that ball from where it wants to go, then it creates a chain reaction of good defense, really. And that's as simple as it gets. And in basketball, it's hard. Particularly the rules favor the offense. But you got to be able to guard the 3 to 5 feet on either side of you. So you think of yourself as, let's say, that's about a 12-foot area. You got to be able to defend within 2 dribbles. And if you can make that ball go a little bit east-west, it's a huge advantage for you.
When ball contain falls off, is effort or lack thereof generally the pinpoint problem?
I think some of it, yeah, for sure. Some of it's technique. You could drop your inside foot. You could reach and gamble a little bit too much, all of which we've been guilty of. Physicality, you got to have a kind of play with a bit of physical nature to stand up that drive. And, we've been a little bit kind of soft when we've been hit on some of those drives. And then, there's a number of things. It's not just effort. I think more than saying it's a lack of effort, it's about how far is your competitive spirit,
yeah,
you're gonna fight all the way to the end, or you're gonna fight 85%. So
isn't that, along with our conversation last week when you went deeply into rebounding, it's the awareness. The anticipatory skills. It's just being on point with not only what's in front of you, but what's coming. Right?
Yeah, and then I think to me, rebounding is oftentimes directly related to your ball contain, which you might say, well, how is that? But if you are not able to contain the ball, and now you forces a chain reaction of rotations, and generally, the ball gets deep, it engages your bigger guys, it forces your smaller guys to be more active on the glass, and if you're in rotations, you're trying to cover ground, and you may not be able to get there. So, so it's really the heart of great defense is winning that point of attack. And we preach it all the time, and we've been really good at it. And at times we have been this year, but, you're going to have to be really good at it in the playoffs because there's going to be a lot of times where it's just you and the ball, and that's what it boils down to.
Monday at Indiana and with Edwards' thumb, how much did you go tinkering with lineups? Specifically, say in the second half when you guys were down like 8 or 10 points. I mean, how much tinkering did you do with the lineups?
I mean, I did a lot of tinkering with the lineups in Indiana, but unrelated to Anthony's thumb, it was just more like trying to find 5 guys that would click.
Right.
I mean, didn't feel like we had any real critical mass of guys who played well that night. Rudy was probably the best, most consistent performer. But it was just trying to find a combination of guys who could string together stops and score. And we didn't have enough guys play well that night. So it was not a lot of science behind that tinkering, to be honest with you, PA. It was just, let's try this. Okay, that's not working. Let's try this. So, sometimes it gets like that, and it's not always a good place to be because, you want to be more strategic, but, we just had to find something.
Let's hit the other side of the coin, Chris, with some things that you're liking. And the way I bring it up like that because how about the Western Conference, man? I mean, since we chatted 8 days ago, they all keep losing. I mean, it's like there was a patch, you win 8 in a row or whatever. Golden State can't lose with Butler. The Clippers are on their high horse, and everybody was going great guns. And now Steph is battling a pelvic problem, missed the Miami game last night. Harden has an ankle. Jokic hasn't played in nearly 2 weeks. So despite the recent losses and with 9 to play, what are you liking about your team's lot in life?
Well, I'm liking that we do have a recipe to win. We just got to stick to it. The good thing about this time of year, PA, is you know who you are and you know who you aren't.
Right.
And if you can't, figure that out by now, or you haven't figured it out by now, then, you're probably not going to, or not wanting to at this stage. But we have a recipe that we know that wins, and we've shown that, and we just now got to get our edge back. I think that's what's happened to us. We've just lost our edge just a little bit. And of course, we haven't operated with a margin for error all season. Fortunately, to your point, teams have been dropping games. That's always going to be the case down the stretch. There's twists and turns in every season, right at the end, right up to the last day. It's why we don't, we try not to get too high or too low about things. But we do have to get our edge back mentally. I think we got to get it cranked back up, finish as strong as possible, and everything is still there for us. So I do like that. I like that as well. I like that we still have an opportunity to get into the top 6. We're certainly not afraid of playing anybody in the Western Conference, but we'd like to make it as easy on ourselves as possible by avoiding the play-in tournament.
So Chris Finch, coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, thanks to Second Harvest Heartland and 2harvest.org. And back to the defense piece for a second. So with 3 days and change to work on stuff this week, and you mentioned gives us a chance to really dive into the technique and or the wherewithal with the tenacity of the defense. So, I mean, like how far back, are they doing slides? I mean, are you going baseline to baseline slides here or what?
Well, sure. We have no problem on brushing up on the basics because sometimes it's the basics that let you down more than anything else. Like the fundamentals sometimes get sloppy, and we've had such an like every other team in the league, like we've had such a crazy schedule over the last several months that practice time's been at a, minimum. And so what happens then is you just, no matter how well you're playing, and sometimes the better you play, you slowly inch towards the sloppiness. And because you win some games, it's covered up and you don't really have a chance to practice. So it kind of builds on top of each other. And I think that's a little bit of where we've gotten to defensively. So absolutely, we're going to go all the way back to the basics and we're going to build it all back up. And, you should be able to move quickly through a lot of that stuff because, we've been doing these drills since we've been playing the game.
Right. That's terrific. How's Anthony's thumb?
It's good, man. He's good. Like, I think I didn't think he would play the other night. All credit to him for playing. He didn't shoot the ball well, but he wasn't complaining that it was related to his thumb.
So when you re-engage and take on Phoenix here Friday, do you anticipate that laceration, this thumb deal, is like markedly better Friday?
Well, I would hope so. I think it's one of those things is going to get a little bit better every day. I think once the kind of the tenderness around the injury subsides a little bit, kind of should just be a little bit more muted all the time.
Hey, Chris, I was watching Rick Pitino and St. John's get bounced from the NCAA tournament, and it triggered a thought to me because when he coached the Knicks, or maybe it was the Celtics, but why doesn't the full court press work in the NBA?
Too much skill. The players are too good.
Yeah.
Hey, let me I was talking to somebody about this just the other day, and they actually pointed out to me, and I'll just, I'll relay it. Matt Lloyd, our general manager, he says that, our 15th guy for all intents and purposes on our roster is the University of Iowa's leading scorer and National Player of the Year.
Right.
Right. So, it just shows you how much talent there is in the NBA. And when you give more space, more runway, more time, all these guys can make a shot, they can dribble, make a play. There's gonna be times where a press works. There's gonna be times where a zone works. It works in periods, but to do it for a whole game and a whole season, it's just too. There's just too much talent on the floor, too much speed. And the other thing I would say, PA, is there's just too much green light. College coaches generally by nature they have their hands on the reins and they're always pulling their guys back. And there's a couple guys out there who may not even be allowed to shoot in certain situations or if at all.
Right.
So you're really only having to guard 3 guys. But that's not the case in the NBA. For the most part, everybody has the green light in most situations, and that makes everybody some sort of threat. So that's one. And I also feel like, to do that, you got to play, you probably have to play a really deep roster over 82 games and even out the minutes. And, you're not going to have your star players playing 26, 27 minutes because you're trying to press. They need to be on the floor another additional 10 minutes because of the value that they have to the game. They make such a big difference to have these high leverage guys on the floor.
And so many so many big guys can handle the ball. It's like just think Naz Reid. Okay, they zap you one time on a press, you change something, now you got Naz against a big and he's going to get around him, and then that probably would lead to a run out in your favor, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you see with some of these pressing teams or these zone teams or these, certainly defense, like really, really, really tough defensively committed teams in college game. And what happens to them in the tournament is they don't lose because somebody might break their press. They lose because they can't score.
Yeah.
You lose in the tournament because of variance. Somebody might get hot from 3 against you, but more often than not, you go really cold from 3, or you can't get enough offensive into the game. That's what I saw in that St. John's game. They couldn't score.
Right.
And if you have one bad night of shooting and you're out from the tournament, no matter what. And if you're going to play a style that's going to affect your offense, like a pressing style, unless you're creating a lot of turnovers and turning it into instant offense, and you're putting your offense under a lot of pressure.
Do you watch much of the NCAA tournament? And if so, do you enjoy it?
I do watch it. I'll watch the majority of it if I can. I'll certainly check in, and it's always on in the background. I do enjoy it. It's an unbelievable sporting event. I think it's a phenomenal event. Like, it just has, this kind of this inherent built-in drama that plays out over time. It's really hard not to watch. But what I do find a bit difficult about it is that there's not a lot of name recognition. I don't know many of these players.
Right.
And whether it be through the movement, or the one and dones, et cetera. I'll start to get familiar with some of these guys during the tournament, and I'll say to the front office, "Hey, who should I be watching?" Because I know I'll have a chance to watch.
Yeah.
And they'll hit me with some names. But it's not like the old days where, I'm all for the game being how it is, so I don't want to sound like one of those old dudes who just thinks it's better way back when. But, like, you remember the days where you're like, oh my God, what's Ewing going to do in his sophomore year? Like,
right.
What's Ewing going to do in his junior year? Like Michael Jordan, like, there was another level of expectation and familiarity that you had with these teams because you knew the players and you can watch them grow.
Absolutely agree. And by the way, guess who I met Monday? I met Auburn's Janai Broom. Are you familiar?
Oh, wow.
Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, absolutely. He's I think he's a modern big. He's super talented. I think he's going to be, certainly a first round pick. He's the type of guy that will, I think, translate in the NBA, probably even have a little bit more success. Just because of his style of game will fit more closely with the NBA style. So.
Yeah, he's a Vikings and T-Wolves fan, as I learned. And Parker Fox, who played for the Gophers basketball team, knows him quite well, so he was nice enough to come on the show Monday. And he's coming up here after, I think they're going to win the NCAA tournament. So when that's done, he's going to come up here. Man, he blocks like 3 shots a game. It's pretty good. And he loves your squad. So Janai Broom, who knew? Now, it obviously would be cool if you won your final 9 games. Phoenix is here Friday, and you guys have had immense success against them back through that playoff series. But we have new people on the team now. So specifically the last 3 this season against Phoenix. Why do you guys play them so well?
Well, I think a couple of reasons. One is we've played them. We know them well. We have a personal grudge with them. That sparks our defensive competitiveness, which we were talking about in the beginning of the show.
Right.
Anything to get us back there is going to help. That's one. We've been able to kind of like figure out a bit with. Don't forget, last year, PA, they swept us in the regular season.
Yep.
And so we kind of really had to look at ourselves and figure out through that process, like, what were some things that we were doing wrong against them. So we've been able to correct some of those things. I don't really want to share what they are on the air, but yeah, so it's just, but every game is going to be different. They're playing really well. They're probably playing their best basketball of the season, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
They have won 5 of 6. They are super motivated to make to the play-in tournament. And, you can see them coming. They're getting a little bit better, and they're beating some good teams along the way, too. So it's not like they're just beating up on the schedule.
A couple more here with Chris Finch, coach of the Wolves. Nas caught fire at Indiana. Has it been challenging in any way, mixing Nas, Julius, and Anthony and getting it to go the way you want?
I think early in the season it has been a little bit more challenging. I think Nas Julius combination I've talked about before has been one that's really sparked us offensively. And some of our best lineups are with those 3 guys on the floor together. And if you then add Dante, and it's one of our, it's probably our best 4-man lineup, no matter who the 5th person is.
Right.
So I think it's a lineup we got to get to more. It's funny bring this up because I was just thinking about it the other day, just how can we tweak our substitution patterns to get to it and have it out there a little bit longer because it's been good to us, and I think it's going to help all three of those guys find a rhythm together.
You got three kids, I'll say, three younger players on your team who, with Clark and Shannon Jr. and Dillingham, they're kind of like the backup quarterback when people talk about your team away from you, where, if a quarterback has 3 bad games, well, then the backup's the most popular guy in the room. And if you guys lose some games, we hear a lot about the kids, so I'll frame it up like this. After the Pelicans win last week, Julius said something like during a couple of losses, team energy was down. So if you sense that to be accurate in games, do you consider using the kids who you may lose something maybe offensively and or defensively, but they're going to be spry and they're going to get out there and pump it up a little bit? Do you consider that?
Yeah, we consider that. We do consider that. We consider everything. We've had some guys who, haven't kind of necessarily shot the ball well or played their best basketball over the last week or so. And, it's certainly something that we've talked about doing more of, just throwing those guys in there and see what they give us. But there's also something to, riding out with a guy and going back to him and see if he can catch a bit of a rhythm. Too. So it's delicate, but all these things are certainly considered. I mean, Jalen Clark is an embodiment of that. He gives us those types of plays every single time he goes out there. We love the force and physicality that TJ plays with. There might be times that we could have used that in the last week. I'm not going to say there's not. These are always things you think about when you don't win a game. Rob can give us some playmaking too. So, but we're also trying to, we were trying to maintain a rhythm, and it felt like we could get back there. But if things continue as they are, then everything's on the table.
Last one. Thanks for that candid answer too. With Clark, and I don't use the word elite frequently. I'm not a best or a worst ever kind of guy, but Clark's on-ball defense, man. It has some elite to it sometimes, doesn't it?
Sure does. I mean, he's got a super high care factor. Like, he goes back to, again, what we were talking about in the beginning of the show here. It's just so competitive. He just wants to win that battle. It's like, Vince Lombardi, comes down to you and the man in front of you. Like, who's going to win that battle? So he does that. He takes great pride in that. And, then he makes all the little plays off the ball too. So he's a complete package defensively. He knows who he is. He's got mental toughness. If someone scores on him, he doesn't have a pity party. He just picks him up again and tries to win the next battle.
You're fantastic, man. That was wonderful. Thank you very much for jumpstarting the show with those candid answers and the energy. And best of luck against Phoenix, and I hope to see you soon, okay?
All right, thanks, PA. Take care.
See ya. Chris Finch, coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves, kicking off
9 to noon.
Courtesy of TimberTech and TimberTech.com. What's on deck 9 to noon includes the return of an old favorite, the old offensive lineman of the day trick. That's right. That's right around the corner. Get ready for it. Draft 4 Thursdays from tomorrow. O-lineman of the day, Alec Lewis with The Athletic. He has a kind of a draft big board involving the Minnesota Vikings that just popped this morning at The Athletic and theathletic.com. Alec will discuss that and much more at 10 o'clock in studio. And Heinze, John Hines at 11 o'clock. Wild took an L last night. Bad evening for the Wild last night. Good news earlier in the day. Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek are going to return to skating very, very soon. And we'll see what Heinze says about that a little later. But then they lose to the Vegas Golden Knights. They've lost back-to-back games. And, of course, St. Louis wins a 7th in a row. Calgary finds a way to win in overtime. And this thing has become of the meat grinder variety, with 10 to go for Heinze's Wild. John Hines, coach of the Wild, at 11 o'clock. Nordo produces, and I'm Paul Allen. Welcome to the Love Covenant at FM 100.3 KFAN. Good morning. radio show.
Let's get back into a flow here.
Yeah, how about Finchy? I think as the kids would say, Finchy was on one this morning.
And he was going stream of consciousness.
Yep, the stream of consciousness, ain't no doubt, had no breaks to it. But you can tell that he's been thinking about a lot of things, maybe getting up at 2, 3:30, 4:30 in the morning, thinking about improving defense. And I'm like, I was joking around. He's like, we got to get this defense better with these 3.5 days.
We got to close the door on it.
And I'm like, all right, so we're going to go oldest of old school here and do slides. Those who played basketball know what I'm talking about, like baseline to baseline slides. Like, why not? Let's go all the way back to the beginning of the fundamentals. But that Second Harvest Heartland, 2harvest.org, prize picks. Thank you very much. And Chris, along with the Timberwolves for the weekly inclusion. I think for 3 years and change now after meeting Chris at the State Fair. It's absolutely a highlight of the week for yours truly, and I'm glad everybody seems to enjoy it. One thing that people absolutely enjoy is kind of right around the corner.
Hardcore football.
It's the NFL draft.
Yes.
Let's dust off some offensive. Let's dust off that offensive lineman of the day trick that we did back in the Elfline days. But here's the deal. They all are Nordo's selections. So he has a chance to fix the race. I intimated that yesterday and didn't close on it because I'm of the tangential variety at times, and I didn't close on it. But here's the deal. 5 offensive linemen will be unfurled this week, and they're all Nordo's selections. And when I say he has a chance to fix the race, here's what I mean. At his fingertips, and then subsequently he gets into a microphone, he can shape our minds walking up to that 24th pick in the draft with the offensive lineman of the day. So what does that mean? It means Mad Producer, let's say, loves Alabama's Tyler Booker. And you may hear Booker is a mauler who also protects well and is a new age Steve Hutchinson with a side dish of Randall McDaniel. This Alabama guard has played in mucho big games. The Vikings will be playing in many big games. And at 6'5", 325 would be a perfect addition to the Minnesota Moving Company. Know what I mean? That's race fixing right there with the glorification and the bouquets thrown the way of, say, Alabama guard Tyler Booker, who is probably incredibly good. So here we go. 5 offensive linemen delivered this week, 5 D linemen next week, then 5 DBs a week in front of the draft. 9 to Noon firmly believes, as I've said, I'm making offensive linemen favored for 24, but maybe not prohibitively favored. And then after that, we got defensive linemen, build the trenches, and defensive backs. So it's like the 24 is going to come from one of those stables.
Yeah.
We believe.
And we have pickle at nickel. We have sneak peek at 3 technique. We have alliteration and bits along the way to cover all bases into the draft.
Now you're talking my language.
I always love that one.
Makes my voice get down there. It's 50 shades of 9 to Noon, and here they are.
So let me do this. And you mentioned Tyler Booker. Between now and Friday, PA, that name's going to come up again as we do O lineman of the day, and you're looking at least a handful of names that potentially could be in purple and gold on Thursday night.
You're going to sell us these 5, and then when you're done, I'm going to pick which one I like most off the way you sold it.
Ooh, I dig that. And so I'm building this up to a Friday crescendo as part of the feast when we're digging into this stuff.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you this, when I was looking at guys this morning.
I think Friday we're at that hotel with the high school bit.
Oh, the high school bit.
Yeah, I think that's taking place, which is really cool, especially if we get to talk to Ron Stolsky.
The coaches clinic and the yearly guests that have kind of emerged from that is awesome. Absolutely. I got obsessed this morning with tackles who can play guard in the NFL.
Here we go.
So Will Campbell at LSU, he's not going to be there. Kelvin Banks from Texas, he's a guy that's kind of jumping up the charts. Most people consider him to be a tackle that he'll stay outside. If you get a chance, and I've seen him creeping up towards the front half of the first round, so maybe he's not there.
Yeah.
Check out Missouri's Armand Membu.
Hey.
No, this guy's unbelievable.
Is he the O-lineman of the day? Is he the new elf line?
No, I'll get to something more realistic. But the beast of beasts, super quick for his size. Yep. He's super smart. He's nasty. If this guy falls to 24, tackle at Missouri, he talked in his combine interviews, teams are looking at him as playing a guard. He still considers himself a tackle, but says he'd be more than happy to show his athleticism at the guard position. I think he'll likely be gone, but Armand Membo out of Missouri, I'm in love with this person. I spent 20 minutes reading and watching him this morning.
Yeah. The goal is for the victorious offensive lineman of the day.
Yeah.
Not only to be a beast of a beast, as you said.
Right.
Just please don't be a beast of burden. We got Florio in 5 minutes.
We do. Well,
let's do this.
Yeah.
Give us how many names you have.
Well, I'll have 2 names for you if we want to pause and return to it later in the show.
Yeah, let's pause for the cause.
Okay.
Give us both the names.
Josh Connerly Jr. of Oregon.
Jeez.
And Donovan Jackson of Ohio State.
Okay.
Those are a couple of names to put in your back pocket.
Yep. So Alec Lewis put together his big draft, Vikings-related draft board at The Athletic. So I'll check and see if any are on that. But we can mix this in with Alec Lewis about 25 minutes from now because Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com, is around the corner on KFAN. Mike Florio, creator of ProFootballTalk.com, is an author, husband, father, and connoisseur of fine Manischewitz, and he's nice enough to join 9 to noon each and every week. And here he is. Good morning, Michael.
Paul, how are you, buddy?
I'm quite well. The owners' meetings are next week. Now, and I've been following this very closely at ProFootballTalk.com. Ideas to alter the kickoff, which was boring and terrible last year. Touchbacks to the 35, maybe kicker backs to the 30 from the 35. Are you a fan? And does any of this have any chance?
Why are you saying it was boring and terrible last year? It was better than it was the year before.
Okay. What about the previous 100 years?
Well, yeah. The idea for last year was to make the play more interesting and also to make the play safer. What they were trying to take out, and they don't like saying this out loud, they were trying to take out the high-speed, unimpeded collisions where you've got 2 large men moving at each other in their maximum potential rate of speed, and they dip their helmets instinctively at the point of impact to potentially have a serious neck injury. That's what they're trying to avoid. So they've crunched everyone together. The high-speed collisions are taken out of it. They're happy with the health and safety impact or lack thereof of this play. They just would like to see it more often now. When you put the touchback point at the 30 for any kicks that go into the end zone and aren't returned or go out of the end zone altogether, when you do the math, when you crunch the numbers and the average return spot is the 29, why not just give another yard and remove from the equation the potential for a kick that goes to the house? So moving it to the 35 incentivizes more kick returns. That's what they're trying to do now. And here's the thing to remember. 2 points. Number one, last year's rule change was temporary. So you got to have 24 votes for anything or it reverts to what it was pre-2024. Number two, the onside kick continues to be the dead play now in this equation, and are they going to do something with that, which would potentially put in a fourth and whatever play, 12, 15, 18, 20, to give the team that's trailing the opportunity to retain possession. That's floating around as some vague potential replacement for the onside kick, which really has become a play that almost never is successful for the team that's trying to erase a multi-score lead late in the game.
Fairly stated. One under the radar thing with the kick situation last year, and I don't believe it led to debilitating injuries or somebody having to miss like half a season. But in those tight quarters, as the returner comes out, if he makes the first guy or guys miss, is from what I understand, you're getting guys ear holed because they're so congested, they don't see guys coming. And so therefore, their plays or plans where guys are just getting absolutely slaughtered. Granted, not with full speed, but they're still getting slaughtered in a congested area. So it's I just don't understand why they don't completely eliminate it. If they're
You're getting kickers blown up full speed also in this new formation. So they're trying to make the play exciting. And you're right. At some point, the alternative is the drive just begins at the 25, the 30, or the 35. Pick a spot and off you go.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if we're going to have a lot of touchbacks, if we're not going to have returns, why even do it? But I like what they did last year better than what they'd been doing. They've been trying to make what they call the most dangerous play in the game more safe by doing it as infrequently as possible. That's not a solution. They came up finally with a solution, and we'll see where that solution leads them next week.
Kirk O'Chains, the Cousins piece that you dropped via the Albert Breer report. So reading between the lines here, it's safe to say that he wants to start, right? Which, I mean, if that's the case, then via sneaky trade or whatever, he's a no-go here, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the goal is to find a spot where he walks through the door as QB1,
right.
Now waiting until after the draft to decide whether to waive his no-trade clause so he doesn't have the rug pulled out from under him the way that it was last year in Atlanta. Surely he did not expect that the Falcons would use the 8th overall pick in the draft on a quarterback instead of a guy that would help the team perform better last year with Cousins, and this year with Cousins, and next year with Cousins. So he doesn't want to have that happen. Again, once bitten, twice shy. I get that. But the question becomes, where will the spots be after the draft? Will there be teams that are clearly looking for a starter when the dust settles? I think right now the Browns are the only team that would fit that bill, because the Giants have both Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. The Steelers likely to have Aaron Rodgers at some point. Obviously, if that falls through, the Steelers would be in play for Kirk Cousins. But that's how he's playing this. The $27.5 million he's due to make from the Falcons, it's fully guaranteed. $10 million next year has vested. That's not the issue. The issue is he wants to play. And he becomes a trade target if the Falcons are willing to move on from their own insurance policy. Because, look, you need to have multiple quarterbacks who can play.
Right.
And when you look at the total cost of Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix Jr., it's not that much money. It's not that much cap space. And they've already paid Kirk $62.5 million. They don't want to just give him away at this point. So it's a complicated, multi-directional dance with new team, Falcons, and Cousins all part of it. And then if there's a team out there that really is looking for a starting quarterback, you know, Kirk, the incredible businessman, at some point may say, hey, if you want me to waive this no-trade clause, offer me more than $27.5 million this year. If I'm coming in to start, I'm worth more than that.
Wow. Holy cow, you laid that out nicely. So with the Steelers, so after last week's visit, I mean, do the Steelers just wait for Rodgers now? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I think so. And look, I don't know what the end game here is. I've heard that Rodgers is following advice from his agent to take his time, that waiting increases leverage, and wherever the Vikings have ended up on this, if they want to see what J.J. McCarthy does in the offseason program before making a final decision, possibly circling back around to Rodgers, I don't think he'll be there by the time it happens. But right now, it's the Steelers, the Vikings, or just wait and wait and wait, and maybe wait to see if there's a starter for a Super Bowl contender that gets injured, and if that team is willing to bring in Rodgers rather than go next man up, so be it. But the thing with Pittsburgh is I've lived in and around Pittsburgh pretty much my entire life. I'm 100 miles right now from Heinz Field. I can get there in an hour and a half. I understand the vibe. I understand the mindset. And there's been some pushback by Steelers fans on this Rodgers idea. At first, I thought it was because they thought he isn't good enough. It's like, folks, he's better by far than anything you've had at the quarterback position since Ben Roethlisberger retired.
Right.
I've since gotten the sense that there's just a cultural question. There's an issue. There's a reality that the Steelers have never been the team that goes out and brings in the short-term carpetbagger, that you have people who are Steelers. And when Cam Hayward articulated it last week by saying either you want to be a Steeler or you don't, I think the frustration for a lot of Steelers fans is coming from the fact that anything other than hell yes from Aaron Rodgers is an insult to them, because the Steelers want you. And if the Steelers want you, you say yes. And I feel like that's where some of this is coming from. Now, if he shows up and they win, that'll all be forgotten. But for now, the hesitation seems to be that because he is hesitating, they think that he really isn't one of them.
Well, and I brought up the Steelers with you last week and used the word dysfunction, and that was off seen maybe at PFT, but somewhere, like Russell Wilson was just changing out of run after run after run at the end of the season with the plays Arthur Smith was calling in. And, that leads to a little uncertainty and or dysfunction. And, since we last chatted, Najee Harris, he won't leave the Steelers alone. He's killing the facility. He's saying lack of direction on offense and things like that. So, if Aaron knows that and or more and thinks, why do I want to go there? It's all of this happened. Why can't it happen again? I'd understand that, wouldn't you?
Well, I don't know how many choices he has at this point, though. Right. If he wants to go out as a guy who gets beyond the regular season, he hasn't been to the playoffs since 2021. The last year he won the MVP. 22, they didn't make it. That was the year that the Lions went into Lambeau Field and beat them the last game of the regular season. 23 was his 4 snaps and done for the year when the Achilles popped. Last year was 5-12. His worst record as a full-time starter in his entire career. If you want to go out in the postseason, and obviously everybody wants to go out with a Super Bowl championship, but the next best thing is at least be on a playoff team. Get back to the playoffs before you call it quits. I feel like the Steelers are his best option. Now, would the Vikings be a better option? Possibly, but the issue in Minnesota is there's a young quarterback that I think it's prudent to see what he can do because maybe he can be the guy for the next 15 years. In Pittsburgh, they just don't have that. It's Mason Rudolph or Skylar Thompson right now. So Rodgers walks through the door as the best quarterback they've had since Ben Roethlisberger, and he possibly fuels them not just to the playoffs, but to their first playoff win since the 2016 season. And I feel like they're becoming increasingly desperate to break this cycle. They pay all that money to DK Metcalf, something they've never done to a stranger to the organization. They're playing this game with Aaron Rodgers that's causing their fans to be frustrated. But the goal here is to not just have a strong regular season and be on the right side of 500 or not on the wrong side of 500, which Mike Tomlin has never done. He's never had a losing record, if you haven't heard that. That's it's like Jerome Bettis is from Detroit. But they want to win a playoff game. This is going to be 9 years. This is going to be 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years. 10 seasons since they've won a playoff game, and you have to wonder what's the next step if they don't get there. Are they inching toward doing that thing they never do, which is reset at the coaching position?
Now, you Mike Florio and PFT, have followed the league as closely, if not the most closely, of anybody the last quarter century. And I followed it pretty closely, but I think we saw a first last week, man, and buried in the Rodgers monotony is the Bills signed 2 free agents who are going to be suspended for 6 games due to performance-enhancing drug usage. Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi. I have you ever seen something like that popping up with 1 or 2 free agents?
No, and you wonder what information is available to the team at the time that they make these decisions. And the way that I remember it, at one point it was explained to me as you can find out if you ask, but they aren't going to just tell you. You have to ask the right questions at the right time. That was an odd little twist, I'll admit, but fairly far down on the stack of things that drew our attention during the first week of free agency.
Why do you think nobody has moved on Joe Flacco?
That's a great question. I don't know, because he can still play.
Right.
He can still throw it. Yeah, he's 40, but he can still throw it. He was the comeback player of the year when he literally came back off of his couch in 2023. Last year with the Colts in a difficult situation where they've got a young guy that they're trying to groom to be the starter. He came in, he got it done. I think you get him in the right spot, you get him in the right offense, you get him with the right coaching. I think he becomes the potential perfect backup to J.J. McCarthy and veteran insurance policy. To the extent that the Vikings are concerned that they don't want a veteran there who aspires to nudge J.J. to the sideline, I think Joe Flacco would be the guy who can go in and do all the right things, say all the right things, provide the support, and be ready to play if the need arises for him to play. So he was looking at Steelers, Browns, Giants, Vikings, and right now I think he'd still be in play for all of them but the Giants, the Steelers, the Browns, and the Vikings.
Time for two more.
For Mike Florio, ProFootballTalk.com, also an author with another book coming out relatively soon. Russ with Jameis and the Giants. What do you like about that? And what type of options does that give the Giants with their third overall pick in the draft?
I like the fact that adding both Jameis Winston and Russell Wilson in fairly short order when they had only one quarterback on the roster, Tommy DeVito, as of last Friday morning, they can now do their final draft analysis without any bias that would be nudging them toward a quarterback. You know, teams will say, we're going to take the best available player. Okay, fine. But your needs inform your assessment of the best available player. And you can have bias that creeps in because you know you need a quarterback. So now they can just go and decide who's our best option at 3, who's our best option at 34 when they use their first 2 picks. And if it works out that a quarterback is the best option, so be it, because they could trade or cut Jameis Winston. He's got $4 million in guarantees. Hell, they could trade Russell Wilson if there's a team that's looking for a starter when the dust settles on the draft. They're not tied into both of those guys. And the $4 million guarantee to Jameis Winston, less whatever he would make elsewhere if he's released, that's a small price to pay to preserve your ability, number one, to do a full and complete and objective assessment of the quarterbacks, and number 2, not have a big sign hovering over your helmet when it's time for the draft picks to be made. This team is looking for a quarterback, because we know what happens. If everybody knows that, you're susceptible to getting leapfrogged in the line. This way, they don't have desperation. They've got a couple of insurance policies. They can see how the draft plays out. So I think it helps them in that regard. I still don't understand why they wanted Russell Wilson. I mean, the Steelers did not want him.
Right.
Not that long ago, the Steelers were saying, well, our preference is to sign Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. And the moment Fields left for the Jets, then, okay, fine, you're signing Russell Wilson. Nope. There was never any mention of any serious intent to try to sign Russell Wilson. And he got $10.5 million from the Giants, guaranteed. Everything else is incentives. $10.5 million. If the Steelers wanted him, they could have gotten him for that. They just didn't want him. And it makes me wonder, what are the Giants missing here? Or what were the Steelers missing when they decided they didn't want him? And they came to that conclusion after 5 straight losses by an average margin of 13.2 points. Yes, he started 6-1, finished 0-5, 13.2 average margin of defeat in those last 5 games.
Lastly,
football feast.
I missed this last week because we ran out of time. Tom Brady potentially getting some final say with the Raiders. Do you like that? Because most former players never are as good with this stuff as they think they're going to be.
I think that anybody who is going to be in a position to make those kinds of decisions owes it to himself and the team to be 100% all in with the organization. The thing that's bothered me about Brady is he primarily works as the number 1 broadcaster for Fox, and on the side, he's minority owner / majority influence of the Las Vegas Raiders. There's just something about that doesn't sit well. I think it's a clear conflict of interest, and there are people out there who say, oh, how dare you say that? Well, it's true. It's true. And the fact that the NFL has put restrictions on what he can do by way of preparing for his Fox job is an acknowledgement that there's a conflict of interest there. It's 2 separate jobs that do not fully and completely mesh. And Miles Simmons put it best during the season when we were talking about this on PFT Live. Brady is the guy who wants to be the absolute best at everything he does. And it is impossible for him to be the absolute best commentator for Fox and the absolute best minority owner, majority influence of the Raiders. The two do not mesh. You can't be the absolute best at both. And I think if he's going to have that kind of influence with the Raiders, he owes it to himself, the Raiders, the NFL, and everyone involved to say, see you later to the $37.5 million from Fox and go all in with being the owner of the Raiders. And if you can't do that, just be a passive investor and let the people who are devoting their full professional lives be the ones who make the decisions about the future direction of the Raiders.
The best. Thanks for the conversation. Talk soon.
See you, Paul.
Mike Florio, PFT. Yeah, you know we. Middle hour of the radio show features Alec Lewis from The Athletic and theathletic.com with the NFL Draft 4 Thursdays from tomorrow, and that's next.